The FBI Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, sat calmly at the witness table, reviewing his notes with the practiced, meticulous focus of a man who'd spent decades in federal law enforcement. Across from him, Senator Adam Schiff approached the microphone. Schiff wasn't just a senator, he was a political icon. The lead prosecutor in the court of public opinion. A man who had built a global brand on the promise of destroying his political enemies. He approached Bongino with the theatrical confidence of a man who believed he was, once again, about to destroy a right-wing conspiracy theorist, for the adoring applause of the gallery and the media. He had made a fatal, hubristic error. He had no idea that in 42 short minutes, his entire political career would be in ashes. Again, some people, it seems, never learn. You do not, under any circumstances, launch an ad hominem attack against a man who has access to every file, every record, every buried secret in Washington. Schiff believed he was sparring with a media personality. He tragically forgot he was challenging the deputy director of the FBI. A man who had come to the hearing not with talking points, but with investigative files. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on FBI oversight was supposed to be routine. Democrats would grandstand about political weaponization. Republicans would defend the Bureau. And everyone would posture for the cameras before going home for lunch. But Adam Schiff had other plans. He saw a target. Deputy Director Bongino, Schiff began, his voice dripping with that familiar, theatrical disdain. Before we discuss FBI oversight, I think the American people deserve to know how a podcaster, a YouTube personality who was banned for spreading misinformation, somehow became the second highest ranking official in our nation's premier law enforcement agency. Bongino looked up from his notes, his expression perfectly neutral. 25 years in the Secret Service and the NYPD had taught him to let the target talk. The more they talk, the more rope they give you. I mean, Schiff continued, warming to his theme, playing to the cameras as always. Your qualification seems to be that you were good at, what? Yelling into a microphone? Selling supplements? Perhaps you could explain to this committee what exactly qualifies you to oversee federal investigations, other than your willingness to parrot conspiracy theories. A few Democratic senators chuckled. Schiff leaned back, satisfied with his opening salvo. Bongino slowly removed his reading glasses. He cleaned them with deliberate, methodical care, and put them back on. When he spoke, his Brooklyn accent was thick but controlled. Senator Schiff, thank you for that colorful introduction. Before I address your characterization of my career, I'd like to clarify something. You asked about FBI oversight, correct? That's why we're here, Schiff said smugly. Outstanding, Bongino replied. Then let's discuss oversight. He opened a thick folder, marked with the official FBI letterhead, starting with the FBI's oversight of you. The smile vanished from Adam Schiff's face. Excuse me? You see, Senator, Bongino said, his voice hardening, when you demand testimony from the FBI about our operations, you open the door to discussing all our operations. He pulled out a document, his thumb running along the tab, including Investigation File 2019, Louisiana, 47823. Are you familiar with that case number? Schiff's attorney, seated directly behind him, instantly recognized the procedural catastrophe that was unfolding and leaned forward to whisper urgently. Schiff, in his arrogance, waved him off. I'm not aware of any. Really? Bongino interjected, his voice cutting through Schiff's bluster. Because this is the FBI's investigation into the systematic leaking of classified information from the House Intelligence Committee between 2017 and 2020. Your committee, Senator, during your chairmanship. Bongino looked up, his eyes cold. Would you like me to refresh your memory? The hearing room, which had been buzzing with side conversations, went dead quiet. Deputy Director, Schiff tried to recover. You can't simply make unfounded accusations. Unfounded? Bongino's voice turned to steel. Senator, I spent 12 years in the Secret Service protecting presidents. I spent 4 years with the NYPD protecting New Yorkers. I don't make unfounded accusations. I present evidence. Senator Lindsey Graham, the committee chairman, leaned into his microphone. Deputy Director, are you saying there's an active FBI investigation into Senator Schiff? Bongino turned to Graham, his tone one of pure, Professional courtesy. Senator Graham, I am simply responding to Senator Schiff's request for FBI oversight. He asked about our operations. I am providing that oversight, including our investigations into the illegal disclosure of classified information. He then turned back to Schiff. If Senator Schiff would prefer I not discuss FBI investigations in this public setting, he is welcome to withdraw his request for testimony. All eyes turned to Schiff. It was a perfect, inescapable trap. Withdraw, and he looks guilty, admitting to the entire world that there's something to hide. Continue, and he faces a public execution. File by file. Broadcast live on C-SPAN. His ego, the very thing that started this confrontation, made the decision for him. I have nothing to hide. Schiff stammered. Bongino allowed himself the thin smile of a predator who had just heard his prey step onto the pressure plate. Excellent. Then let's continue with the oversight you requested. Page 1 of 27. This should be educational. Bongino began reading from the file, his voice carrying the mechanical, dispassionate precision of a police report being entered into evidence. January 15, 2019. Classified briefing on Russian military movements. Attended by 6 committee members. January 16, 2019. 6:47 p.m. CNN reports details from said briefing. FBI analysis indicates a 94% correlation between the briefing content and the media report. Preliminary investigation suggests. This is outrageous. Schiff interrupted, his voice cracking. He was losing control. You're attempting to intimidate a United States senator. Bongino looked up, his expression one of genuine, almost academic puzzlement. Intimidate? Senator? You subpoenaed me. You demanded I testify about FBI operations. I am simply complying with your lawful subpoena. He paused, letting the procedural reality sink in. Unless, he added, the trap tightening, you only wanted to hear about certain FBI operations? The ones that fit your preferred narrative? The professional veneer cracked just slightly, revealing the street cop underneath. The Brooklyn accent thickened. See, where I come from, when you pick a fight, you better be ready for what comes next. You wanted oversight. You're getting it. Every single page. He turned back to the file. January 23, 2019. Closed session briefing on clandestine surveillance techniques. January 24, 2019. A Washington Post article is published, containing verbatim quotes from the classified briefing. He looked up again. FBI linguistic analysis confirms a 98.7% probability the quotes came directly from the official transcript. Only committee members had access to that transcript. Senator Schiff's face had gone from its usual prosecutorial red to a pale, clammy white. His chief of staff was frantically typing on her phone, no doubt trying to get guidance from party leadership. But it was too late. The chain of command was broken. Schiff was on his own, stranded on a legal battlefield of his own making. But here's the really interesting part. Bongino continued, pulling a new document from the folder. This is a memo from the Obama administration. Yes, Senator. The Obama administration. Dated November 2016. Subject: concerns regarding Representative Schiff's handling of classified information. Would you like me to read it? In a moment of pure, unadulterated panic, Schiff blurted out the words that would seal his fate. That's classified. Bongino raised an eyebrow. The trap, so perfectly laid, had just been sprung with a sickening snap. Actually, Senator, it was declassified last month. Funny how you knew it existed. Though, almost like you'd seen it before. Back when it was classified. Schiff had just, on the record, admitted to having prior knowledge of a highly sensitive, classified document he never should have seen, confirming his place inside the very intelligence loop he was now being accused of corrupting. Bongino didn't wait for a response. Let me read from President Obama's own Deputy National Security Advisor. Quote, Representative Schiff's tendency to brief media outlets on sensitive intelligence matters poses a significant risk to sources and methods. Recommend limited access to certain programs until behavior is corrected. He looked up, letting the words hang in the silent room. The Obama administration thought you were a security risk. The Obama administration, Senator, not exactly a right-wing conspiracy. Is it? Bongino had just masterfully established a long-standing, bipartisan pattern of behavior. He had neutralized Schiff's entire defense before Schiff could even articulate it. The hearing room was in shock. Democrats were whispering urgently. Republicans were trying, and failing, to hide their grins. "We're just getting started," Bongino said, reaching for another, thicker folder. "You wanted FBI oversight? Let me show you what real oversight looks like. No YouTube required." The clock on the wall read 10:31 a.m. They were only 13 minutes in. And Adam Schiff already looked like he had aged 5 years. Bongino pulled out a second folder. This one marked with declassified stamps so fresh they looked like they were still wet. The methodical, almost surgical way he laid out his evidence was a performance in itself. A prosecutor's choreography designed to build unbearable tension. "Senator Schiff," he began, "you've spent years accusing the FBI of being politicized. So, let's examine that claim, but let's do it with something you might not be familiar with: actual evidence." Schiff tried to regain his footing, to pivot back to the hearing's intended purpose. "Deputy Director, this hearing is about FBI oversight, not—" "Exactly right," Bongino interrupted, his voice sharp. "FBI oversight includes our obligation to investigate crimes. All crimes, by anyone, including members of Congress who think they're above the law." He opened the new folder. "This one's fun. FBI case filed 2020 District of Columbia, 18739. Investigation into the unauthorized disclosure of classified information specifically regarding FISA applications." "You remember FISA, don't you, Senator? You wrote a whole memo about it." The Schiff memo was entirely proper. "Was it?" Bongino shot back. "Because the FISA court itself disagrees." He pulled out a document. "This is a letter from the presiding judge, James Boasberg, dated December 2019. Quote, "The court is troubled by significant misrepresentations in congressional communications regarding these proceedings." Bongino looked up. "He's talking about your memo, Senator." Senator Chuck Grassley, the ranking member, leaned forward. "Deputy Director, are you saying the FISA court formally rebuked Senator Schiff?" "I'm just reading from their letter, Senator Grassley, but it gets better." Bongino flipped the page. "The FBI was required to investigate how classified FISA information ended up in media reports. Our cyber forensics team did something interesting. They analyzed the linguistic patterns in the leaks. Turns out, everyone has a writing fingerprint, like DNA, but for sentences." He pulled out a chart. "This shows a linguistic analysis of Washington Post articles containing FISA information, compared to statements and memos from your office, Senator Schiff. The correlation, 87%. That's not coincidence, Senator. In law enforcement, we call that consciousness of guilt." Schiff was gripping the table, his knuckles white. "This is McCarthyism. You're using the FBI too." "To what?" Bongino's voice dropped to a growl. "To do our job? To investigate federal crimes? You see, Senator, this is the problem with people like you. You think accountability is persecution. You think the law doesn't apply to you. Well, I got news for you. It does." He pulled out another document, and the room held its breath. This was the big one. "Let's talk about your greatest hits. The Russia collusion investigation. You told the American people for 3 years that you had more than circumstantial evidence of collusion. Remember that?" He held up the Mueller report. "The Mueller investigation found no collusion. Zero. Zilch. Nada." Page 2. "The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government." "But you knew that, didn't you? Because I have here." He pulled out another document. "Your emails to Speaker Pelosi from March 2019. The Democratic side of the aisle erupted. Schiff looked like he'd been physically punched in the stomach. You wrote, and I quote, "Nancy, the Mueller report is going to be a disappointment on collusion. We need to manage expectations while maintaining pressure." Bongino let the words echo. You knew there was nothing. But you went on television that very night and lied to the American people. Again. Those emails were illegally obtained. Schiff gasped. "Wrong again," Bongino said cheerfully. "They were provided by Speaker Pelosi's office last month. Turns out, even she got tired of cleaning up your messes." This was the ultimate betrayal. Bongino hadn't just brought FBI files, he had brought receipts from Schiff's own party. He had painted Schiff not as a partisan warrior, but as a rogue agent so toxic that even his own leadership had turned on him. But wait, there's more. Bongino continued, clearly enjoying himself now. The hunt was on, and the prey was cornered. Let's discuss your relationship with the media. Specifically, your burner phones. I don't have any burner phones, Schiff declared, a line of defense that was about to spectacularly collapse. Really? Bongino pulled out a technical surveillance report. Because the FBI's technical surveillance unit says otherwise. 3 separate prepaid phones, purchased with cash, all 3 pinging cell towers near your offices and residence. All 3 making calls to a very specific, very small list of reporters. Bongino leaned forward, the consummate investigator sharing the "how we caught him" part of the story. Want to know how we found them? Your mistake was using them from your car. Modern vehicles are computers on wheels. Your Tesla, Senator, it logs every single phone that connects to its Bluetooth. Even the ones that don't successfully pair. We got the logs, legally, with a warrant, before you ask. This was a masterclass in modern forensics. Schiff, the high-tech inquisitor from California, had been brought down by his own electric car. Bongino pulled out a call log. October 15, 2020. Burner phone ending in 4827 calls Ken Delanian at NBC. 17-minute call. October 16. Ken Delanian publishes a story about a classified intelligence briefing that happened on October 15. That's some coincidence, Senator. This is a witch hunt, Schiff yelled, resorting to the very phrase he had so often mocked. No, Senator, Bongino corrected him, his voice cold. A witch hunt is when you investigate without evidence. This is what we call a slam dunk. Bongino's Brooklyn accent thickened, the street cop returning. You see, in the NYPD, we had a saying, you can't fix stupid. You conducted a years-long campaign of leaking classified information, attacking law enforcement, and lying to the American people, and you did it sloppy. He then pivoted to the second pillar of Schiff's political identity, the Ukraine impeachment. Let's talk about the whistleblower. Bongino continued, using air quotes. You know, the one you coordinated with? The one whose complaint your staff helped write? That's been debunked. By who? You? Bongino laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. I've got the text messages. Senator, from your staff to the whistleblower. Quote. Adam wants more specific allegations in paragraph 3. That's not whistleblowing, Senator. That's script writing. He pulled out yet another file. But here's my favorite part. The FBI has been investigating all of this for years. Quietly, professionally, building cases. And you know what kept happening? Every time we'd get close to something, there'd be another leak to the media about the investigation. Almost like someone was tipping off the targets. Bongino's smile was purely predatory now. Guess whose phone numbers showed up in the call logs of the leak recipients? The hearing room was dead silent, save for the frantic clicking of reporters' keyboards. This wasn't a hearing anymore. It was a public execution. A political autopsy performed on a live subject. One more thing before we move on, Bongino said, closing the folder with a snap. You mentioned my podcast, implying I'm just some media personality. Let me educate you on something. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I've protected presidents from both parties. I've investigated federal crimes. I've testified in court hundreds of times. You're a politician who plays a prosecutor on TV. So when it comes to understanding law enforcement, maybe you should listen instead of lecture. We're 24 minutes in. Senator, 18 more to go. You sure you want to continue this oversight hearing? Because I've got 5 more folders here. And they get worse. Bongino reached for the 4th folder, but paused, looking directly at Schiff with an expression that was almost theatrical in its coldness. You know, Senator, when the House censured you in 2023, they only had part of the story. That was like looking at the tip of an iceberg. The real damage, that was all underneath. He opened the folder. Let me show you what they missed. The document he pulled out was thick, bound like a legal brief. This is the FBI's Financial Crimes Division analysis of your activities. See, leaking classified information for political gain is bad. But taking money to do it, that's a whole other level. Schiff's lawyer, finally sensing the career-ending gravity, stood up. Mr. Chairman, I object to this characterization. This is. Sit down, counsel, Senator Graham said firmly, his voice flat. Your client demanded this hearing. He'll get what he asked for. Bongino continued, unbothered. Let's talk about the speaking fees. Between 2017 and 2024, you collected $3.7 million in speaking fees. That's not illegal. But here's where it gets interesting. $2.1 million of that came from organizations. Organizations funded by foreign nationals. Organizations that just happen to be deeply interested in U.S. intelligence matters. He pulled out a spreadsheet. And the cameras zoomed in. The Atlantic Council, $400. The German Marshall Fund, $350. The Qatar Foundation, $500. All legitimate organizations. All with significant foreign funding. All desperately interested in the classified briefings you were receiving. Those were legitimate speaking engagements. Schiff protested, his voice thin. Were they? Bongino countered, pulling out another document. Because here's your speaking schedule. Cross-referenced with your briefing schedule. Notice anything interesting? Every single speech came within 72 hours of a classified briefing on the exact region that organization cared about. Senator Josh Hawley leaned forward. Deputy Director, are you suggesting Senator Schiff was essentially selling classified information? I'm presenting evidence. Senator Hawley, Bongino replied. The conclusions draw themselves. He pulled out bank records. The payments always came after the speeches. But here's the interesting part. Bonus payments. Payments that directly correlated with media coverage. Bigger story. Bigger bonus. He displayed another chart. Average speaking fee when no major story followed, $50. Average fee when a major leak did occur, $150. That's a hell of a coincidence. Senator Schiff was white as a sheet. Now, you could argue this is circumstantial. Bongino conceded, if we didn't have the emails. He pulled out printed messages. From the Qatar Foundation to your speaking agent. Quote, Mr. Schiff's presentation was extremely valuable. The insights on U.S. intelligence assessments were particularly appreciated. Bonus approved. The room was stirring. Even the Democrats who had remained looked disgusted. This went far beyond partisan politics, it was trafficking in state secrets. Bongino turned his gaze back to Schiff. You're suggesting I'm a foreign agent? Schiff tried to sound outraged. But his voice cracked. I'm suggesting you're for sale. Bongino shot back. And the bidders knew it. We have communications intercepts, legal ones, where foreign nationals discuss how to incentivize you. They called you accessible. In the intelligence world, Senator, that's a polite way of saying corrupt. He pulled out one final document from this section. This is from the CIA. Even they flagged you. John Brennan's CIA. Senator, they wouldn't share certain intelligence with your committee because they assessed you as likely to disclose for personal gain. When even John Brennan thinks you're dirty, you've got problems. Schiff's attorney was now physically pulling at his arm, desperately trying to get him to leave. But Schiff sat frozen, a man watching his own career being cremated in real time. 37 minutes, Bongino noted, checking his watch. 5 to go. One more folder. The worst one. You sure you want to continue? Senator? Because what comes next makes everything else look like jaywalking. Bongino hefted the final folder. It was noticeably thicker than the others. His expression had shifted from cold professionalism to something more personal, a prosecutor's satisfaction at finally cornering a target who had evaded justice for years. Senator Schiff, he began, this last section is what we in law enforcement call a pattern of deception. It's one thing to lie once, maybe twice, but you turned it into a lifestyle, a business model. Let's count your greatest hits. He pulled out a bound document that looked like a small phone book. This is a compilation of every public statement you made about Russian collusion between 2017 and 2019. 847 statements. Television, tweets, speeches, press releases. Our analysts went through every single one. Flipping it open, he began to read. March 20, 2017, MSNBC. There is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion. March 22, 2017, CNN. I have seen evidence of collusion that is damning. March 26, 2017, ABC. The evidence of coordination is overwhelming. He looked up. Want to know how many of these 847 statements were true? 0. Not one. The intelligence suggested. Schiff weakly protested. No, it didn't. Bongino cut him off. And you know how I know? Because I still have your emails to Nancy Pelosi. He held up the sheaf of papers. January 15, 2018. You to Pelosi, Nancy. The collusion angle is weak but politically useful. We should continue pushing the narrative. You knew it was weak. You said it was weak. But you went on TV that night and called it a slam dunk. He pulled out another. March 3, 2019. You to Pelosi. Mueller is going to disappoint on collusion. We need to prepare alternative narratives. You knew Mueller had nothing. But you went on CNN that same week and promised bombshells. The Democratic senators still present were visibly shrinking in their seats. This was indefensible. But lies about collusion were just the appetizer. Bongino continued. Let's talk about your lies during the impeachment. He pulled out a video tablet. This is you. September 26, 2019. Reading the Trump-Zelensky call transcript. Except you weren't reading it. Were you? You were doing your own little one-man show. The video played. Schiff's voice filled the room, dramatically fabricating a sinister shakedown that wasn't in the actual transcript. That's not parody, Senator, Bongino said when it finished. That's fabrication. In a formal congressional proceeding, you lied to Congress while leading an impeachment inquiry. In most places, that's called perjury. I was making a point. You were making things up. Like you always do, Bongino retorted. But let's talk about the ultimate lie. The one that really shows who you are. He pulled out new communication logs. October 2019. You told the American people. We have had no contact with the whistleblower. That was a lie. You told them you didn't know the whistleblower's identity. Also a lie. You told them the complaint was spontaneous. Lie number 3. Your staff met with him 8 times. You personally called him twice. You edited his complaint. You coached him on his testimony. And then you had the audacity to stand up in Congress and claim you were just a passive recipient. Bongino's Brooklyn accent thickened with pure, unadulterated anger. You see, in real law enforcement, we have a name for what you did. It's called subordination of perjury. It's what mob lawyers do when they coach witnesses to lie. Congratulations, Senator. You've achieved mob lawyer status. The clock on the wall showed 10:59 a.m. 1 minute to go. Last item, Bongino said, pulling out a single sheet of paper. This is a letter from the California Bar Association. They are opening an investigation into your conduct. Turns out lying to courts, Congress, and the American people violates legal ethics. Who knew? He closed the folder with a sharp, final snap. 41 minutes of truth. Senator, after 7 years of your lies, you wanted FBI oversight. You got it. Every agency in the federal government has a file on you. Criminal referrals are being prepared. Your own party is abandoning you. The clock struck 11 a.m. We're done here, Bongino said, starting to pack his folders. Unless you have more questions about FBI oversight. Because I've got about a dozen more boxes of evidence back at the Hoover building. We can do this all day. As Bongino finished packing his folders, Schiff made one last, desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Deputy Director, he said, his voice trembling, this is nothing but political revenge. You're a Trump loyalist using the FBI too. Bongino stopped packing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When he turned back to face Schiff, the professional mask was gone. This was personal. Political revenge? Bongino's voice was quiet, which made it all the more dangerous. Senator, let me tell you about political. For 12 years, I protected presidents, Republicans and Democrats. I stood post in the rain, the snow, the heat. I missed my kids' birthdays, my anniversaries, holidays. You know why? Because the job mattered more than politics. He walked back to the witness table. I protected Barack Obama with the same dedication I protected George Bush. I would have taken a bullet for either of them. That's what real service looks like. Not the self-serving theater you call public service. The room was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. But you, Bongino continued, his voice rising, you called agents like me, jackbooted thugs. You said we were Trump's Gestapo. You compared us to Nazis. Senator, Men and women who risk their lives every day to protect this country, and you called us Nazis." He pulled out a printed tweet. October 15, 2020. You tweeted, "The Secret Service has been corrupted by Trump. They're more interested in protecting him than protecting democracy. That's what you said about people like me. While you were calling us corrupt." He spat. "You were the one taking money from foreign interests. While you were accusing us of politicization. You were leaking classified information for political gain. While you were claiming to defend democracy. You were undermining it for cable news hits." He pulled out one final item from his briefcase. It was an email. "I wasn't going to show this one," he said, "but since you mentioned setups." He held it up for the room to see. "This is from you to your staff. Dated 3 weeks ago, right after you issued the subpoena. Quote, Bongino is just a podcaster playing cop. I'll destroy him in the hearing and show Trump's FBI for what it is." The irony was crushing. "You thought you were setting me up," Bongino said. "You thought you'd get some viral moments. You thought I'd be unprepared. Emotional. An easy target. You thought wrong." He looked directly at the C-SPAN camera. Addressing the 3.7 million people watching live. "This is what accountability looks like. Not political theater. Real accountability. Where evidence matters. Where lies have consequences. And where 7 years of corruption gets exposed in 42 minutes." He turned back to Schiff one last time. "You know what your real problem was, Senator? You believed your own press. You thought you were untouchable. You forgot that in America,